Hey friends, this is Dave Taylor coming at you guys with My Pilgrimage Podcast, Week 5, Episode 5. We're talking about triggers this week. The conversation takes place between myself and Jason in the video. This is from the original video series again, mypilgrimage.com. You can go and check out the entire video series if you want right now. Just click on the Resource Center. It's all free. I am recording here from the home up in Maui in the upcountry. Many of you guys that are coming from the recovery world or that have gone through that world, you understand that there are lots of definitions for triggers. Going back to our language episode where we were talking about how it's important to define language, we do that somewhat in the video where we talk about what triggers are. Jason starts out by saying, I think I've been thinking about triggers all wrong. Wrong and right, not really super helpful because there's really no wrong way. It's just the way you're thinking about it now. Is it helpful? Is it not helpful? And the way that we talk about triggers is very distinct. So watch the video and then right after this. And then when you come back, Seth and I are going to have a discussion about triggers. Distinctly, we're going to talk a lot about the different recovery kind of programs and the different things that are out there. And kind of what we've seen in the world when it comes to triggers. So we will see you guys on the other side.
So Dave, in the book, there's a lot of talk about triggers, and I think I've been thinking about triggers all wrong. I mean, in the past, I've always thought about triggers as something like that causes me to lust, like it might be a billboard or a runner chick or something like that, and I guess it's more like an emotional thing. Help me identify that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so first thing you can do is flip it around and say that trigger's a thing that's helpful when it comes to this kind of work. You know, something, let's say you're short on money or you're overdrawn on your bank account. And it brings up that anxiety. And that anxiety is the thing that we used to always want to go and medicate, you know. And like you were saying, we would think of triggers as, you know, you're on the internet and the pop-up ad with a gallon of bikini, whatever comes up, and that's the trigger, that's the thing.
Yeah.
But we actually think of triggers as the bank account thing, or something that actually is going to make you feel that anxiety, that thing that you want to medicate, that thing you want to not feel.
Okay.
So in this sense, you could take something that's very negative and you could use it to help bring up those things, to help kind of uncover the stuff that's underneath. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think in the past, like I worked really hard to eliminate porn from my life and was successful at that, but and that kind of uncovered some of those things like you're talking about, like anxiety or frustration or anger, and things that I didn't know were there, but they were causing me to go down that road. Yeah. So what you're talking about is maybe a more direct route.
Yeah, I'm saying like even in that situation where you would see that thing come up and you'd see that and go, oh, that's where I need to go. And that's the thing that needs to be healed. You know, a trigger is a thing that brings up the things that need to be healed. For example, a good trigger for me has been money, you know, problems with money or not having enough money. The anxiety that comes up, can I take care of my family, and those things that happen. And for me in the past, I think I would tend to retreat and I would kind of medicate that thing. I would go to porn, it would help numb that, and I could kind of continue to have some semblance of function just getting through it. But it always kept coming back up and kept coming back up. In this way of thinking, the money thing triggers, and when we go into that space, we understand that, oh, I've got pain, I've got suffering rooted in issues with money. So instead of medicating it, the choice would be then to go and process that.
Oh, okay.
Right? So you're actually saying, you know, I'm not going to medicate, I'm not going to use pornography or something to make me not feel this. So how do you feel about, you know, us sort of redefining that word triggers?
I think that it's healthy. I think in the past I've taken more of an indirect route in identifying what a true trigger would be. And this new way of seeing it is much more of a direct route. So I feel good about it, but it's definitely going to take some time to like get down on it and figure out what those actual triggers are.
Yeah, do you have any ideas of what some of those might be?
I think that loneliness or isolation, anxiety would that be triggers, or are those just emotions?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But the thing that begins So think of anxiety as like a knot.
Right.
It manifests that way, you know?
Uh-huh.
It's the thing that begins that process of feeling that. That's your trigger.
Yeah.
So that's the gift that gets you going and gets you to feel that, so you start to find the things that need to be healed, right?
Mm.
So anxiety is actually kind of a symptom of the thing that's underneath needing to be healed, yeah? And whatever triggers that anxiety, whatever it starts to cause that, so money, stress, work.
So the trigger's not the emotion.
No, yeah.
So then the trigger, let me dig a little deeper, would probably
Yeah.
be more along the lines of feeling inadequate for a job I've been given to do.
Right.
Or a challenge in front of me, whether it be parenting or something I need to guide my family in.
Yeah, kids are amazing triggers.
Yeah.
Why? Your wife, your relationship with your wife can trigger things inside you. Your job, your boss. You might have a boss or something like that.
Interesting.
You know, or something you're supposed to do, and that is the thing that causes that stuff. So when you have that anxiety and those things pop up, you know, we see that as a gift. You know, that's the path, you know, to healing. Kind of dig deep. Like, what would you say are some of the things in your life that directly make you feel those things?
Well, I noticed in my old model of thinking that after a big success, like a successful day at work or a big win of some kind, that the come down, that was when I was most vulnerable to temptation. And so I don't know if that...
No, that's great. That's great. So you would have the big win, and then what afterwards? That you said the come down.
Mm-hmm.
What happens in the come down?
I think the excitement wears off.
Excitement wears off, and you're left with what?
Usually I'm alone, so maybe a little bit of loneliness.
Yeah, you mentioned loneliness and isolation, and these are the things. So the trigger is the come down, right? The trigger is that happening. When what you would want, right? What you would want is to feel that win, and then just keep moving through in a positive manner, and just continue to feel kind of the happiness of having done that. But now we keep working on this. When that come down is that trigger, you know, that's the trigger, right? So you would, in this way of thinking, you would actually, after something like a win, if you were observing it and you saw that come down happening, and you could see the stuff happening inside you and going, oh, there it is. It's triggering that. It's making me feel this loneliness. Why am I lonely? Why do I feel this loneliness? Do I want to feel loneliness every time I have a good thing happen to me? So that's,
and in that moment, is that good thing even a form of medication that was keeping me from feeling that trigger to begin with?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because when we say medication, we don't talk about it necessarily in a negative way. We say, yeah, when you're having a great day, you're having a great day.
Right.
Today, I'm in my addiction, you know, for 10 years, if I was having a great day, man, I didn't look at porn today. I'd walk away going, man, that was great. I wish every day could be like this.
Yeah.
Right? And then, but, you know, the next time a client didn't pay their bill, or I you know, had money problems, or the next time I had stress at work, I just go straight back into that space.
Yeah.
And so it became this big mind game, trying to figure out how to have really good days every day. But what it never was about, like going, why the drama? Why the bounce back, the up and down, the up and down? That drama cycle, that up and down and up and down and up and down, is the thing that's not what you don't want. And you don't want ups and downs. You want to actually have a life of balance, right?
Yeah.
That's what everybody wants. So it's, you have those ups, feels great. You kind of have those downs. So you don't want to think about those ups as negative.
Okay.
But you do look at them and go, the up-down pattern is the thing you don't want. You know.
Well, I really like that. I think it gives me some sense of freedom and some sense of hope. But I feel like I have a lot of work to do. Like I hadn't really hit the tip of the iceberg even in all the years of journeying and trying to have recovery through porn addiction.
Yeah.
That's a really cool thing. It gives me a lot of hope to continue growing instead of allowing that trigger to manifest into sin for me, to allow it to show me what it is that I need to process, or I need to go and solve.
And so in that process, it's really important to know it does take courage. For us, it can be easier to medicate, just to go do the same old thing and medicate, because we can kind of get by with some sort of functionality. But if we stand back and look at it, we see that it's destroying our lives.
Yeah.
And that if we ever want to get to a place where we have balance and we have happiness and we have peace, then we have to go there. We have to have the courage to go and say, I'm going to go I'm going to get to the thing underneath the thing.
All right, so we just watched a video with Jason and I having a conversation about triggers.
Triggers.
Let's go right into
pivotal conversation.
Let's go right into how people have viewed triggers and how we view triggers. We know that in like Every Man's Battle, which was the classic book on porn addiction in the church, that triggers were the woman jogging down the street. And though there was also that overlay of kind of judgment for her jogging down the street in a tight outfit.
Yes.
But we bounce our eyes. We avoid, that's a trigger. That's going to trigger my addiction. We think about things very, very differently. You were talking to me about an example about this Rockstar, energy drink ad that you saw. Why don't you tell me
I was stuck at a red light. Yeah. And I was right in the heart of this thing. We're trying so hard, man, and just white knuckling and trying to bounce my eyes. And I'm in Portland. I was a sales guy, so I drive around the city, and I just come to this red light, and you try to beat the red light, and you're like, hit the brakes. You're like, damn it, because there's a 50-foot mural of a porn star in a bikini, and you just like, and I just stood there looking at it like this, and I just went, what chance do we stand?
Right.
You know what I mean? The world is a minefield. The entire thing is a minefield. You're basically saying, with God's help, you can make it across that minefield. Just close your eyes and trust the force or something. You know what I mean? Like it's such an awful way to understand it. I do understand why they call it a trigger, because I was doing just fine. I was going about my day, and then I saw the woman, and now my brain is returned to its cycle of thought, right? Its cycle of thought, and then this inevitable thing. But if there is any one thing I can point to that shifted the entire world for me, is that when our perspective of triggers changed.
Right.
When like the porn star is not the trigger. Porn star is the medication. The trigger were things like, basically there was an energy in my body that I'm medicating, and my goal is to use actual triggers to find that energy and then do something with that energy. So, in my life, things like money was a huge trigger. Money, stress, my relationship with my wife, massive trigger. I had a lot of things, you run into certain people that just trigger you really, really badly. I mean, you and I have a mutual friend that I remember it was easily the most intense trigger in my entire life. And it was just an energy that just wrecks you. And you go and you have a job, and that person you work with at work, or that manager, that boss, just is an extreme trigger. And all that is it's helping you get to the same energy that usually you're medicating,
Right.
And I guess you could say the porn star is a trigger in some ways. It's just a different kind of trigger. It's actually a medicinal trigger,
Yeah. In that, from an energetic, I mean, for me, the draw, and it's interesting because, as always, you always end up, masturbating or whatever when you're a porn addict, and that's the kind of the finishing point. And I know for me, when I was in my, the throes of my addiction, it was get to that finish point, and then turn everything off as quick as possible, erase history, blah, 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 do all that, you know what I mean? And then go back until that thing would come back. Yeah. And that I knew that if I went somewhere, like if I went on vacation, my family, we went to Hawaii or whatever, we lived in Alaska, if we went to Hawaii, I could often go a week or two without it. And I would go, I would immediately think that's because I'm relaxed or whatever, Hawaii, but there was enough distraction and there was enough going on, and enough that I didn't have that same, kind of need. It would just come back as soon as stress came back, as soon as I got back to work, as soon as any kind of thing that hit me stressful wise, that was that. So I would look back and I go, okay, so what was the trigger in that? And when I look back at it, it was the stress, right?
Yeah.
It's
not that you're in Hawaii and you're seeing girls in bikinis, but you're not triggered. It's
the
stress.
No, I never had that issue. I'd go on the boat or whatever. I'd go out to the beach, and you'd see women and wearing thong bikinis and stuff walking around. It never was a thing where I was like, I have to go and find a place to masturbate. It was not a thing. Right. For me, man, it was always work. It was always work. But I know for some guys it really is. Like you see that, and it's an immediate kind of visual trigger. If we go back to the very first episode of the podcast, first episode of the video series, and we talked about what are you medicating. I think this is where these two things really tie in really well. In that the trigger shows us what we're medicating, right? If we have the ability to understand and compartmentalize and understand that the trigger hits me, everything that's happening to me is happening inside me. Yeah. Everything. You know, people like the awareness has to be internal. You have to be able to go, take a breath and go, oh man, I feel that in my body. That's the big thing. What Floyd said, you know, was when we were, you know, what do you want to do today? When I was at his place at White Raven, I said, I have a knot in my chest. Now, what was triggering me then, what was making that thing pulse, as it were, and I was becoming very aware that I had this thing, but it was the first time I'd ever turned my attention inward. You know, my awareness went inward. I was all of a sudden going, oh, it's inside my body. Yeah. That is really key, because especially in the Christian world, we tend to, and in the religious world in general, in the Islam world, in Judaism, in Buddhism, is the same kind of thing. Our attention,
in our Mormon friends we chatted with,
our Mormon friends, our spirituality is outward. It's all behavioral, and it's completely outward. And though we know from the teachings of Christ and of Jesus Christ, and we know from the teachings of Buddha, and we know from the teachings of lots of spiritual, like really, you know, wonderful spiritual teachers, that the experience is inward. You know, that the kingdom of heaven is within. Right? Was that Luke 12?
I think so, yeah.
I think it was Luke 12 when he was talking about how, you know, that the kingdom of heaven, because the Jews were all saying, you know, hey, that was their whole thing. Where is the kingdom of heaven? When is the kingdom of heaven? When are we going to experience the kingdom of heaven? And they had a very distinct theology on what that meant. And you'd have the different sects of Jewish leaders arguing and debating all the time about what that meant and interpreting scripture. And they asked Jesus, they put the question to him, and they were like, where is the kingdom of heaven? You know, how do I see the kingdom of heaven? Because he was going around telling everybody the kingdom of heaven has arrived. Some of them, like Nicodemus, were like, well, obviously I can't see it. You're telling me it's here. You're from God because you're doing all these miracles. So, okay, so what am I missing? Right. And he says to them, the kingdom of heaven is within you. And that seemed like, well, it's a crazy thing that it was there all the time. You know, I grew up in the church. I was quite a kind of a conservative Christian for most of my adult life up to 33, 34. And I never saw that. And I never saw that. And even if I did read it, I didn't read it as something significant, even though that was Jesus teaching. I was like, those are his words, and he's saying this. And I should, as a Christian, be clued in and go, oh, whoa, that means something. Let's dig into that. And we never did, you know?
Well, there's an important distinction to understand here, is because if there's a lot of Christian guys listening to this right now, then that means at some point you were taught an idea that you said a prayer and then Jesus came to live within your heart.
Right.
And that was taking an internal perspective that was still external. So I remember as a kid thinking, well, Jesus is like, there's like a little seat inside me, and Jesus is like sitting on the throne of my heart. You remember that whole concept? And
there was a song. There was a Sunday school song. What was the Sunday school song?
Sunday school song?
It was a school song. There was a Sunday school. That's hard. That's a tough one.
Yeah, that is.
There was a Sunday school.
The idea is, I thought I had this little Jesus sitting inside me, but even that's an externalized idea. When he says it's within you, he's saying it's you.
Right.
Saying it's you. And that's the problem. That's where the theologies get shattered, is when they say it's you. So when Jesus says, do you not know ye are all gods? You know, and when he says,
when did he say that?
Okay, so the Pharisees, you remember when he says, I and the Father are one?
No, right? Do you know where in the scripture? You remember where it is?
He's quoting Psalms 82. I don't remember the exact passage where
I will find it. I'll put it in the show notes on YouTube and on things so people can find
it. So he's quoting the Psalms because they come to him accusing him of heresy because he says he is one with God. He said, no one can be one with God. And he said, do you not know it's written in your law that ye are all gods? Right. And of course, people don't preach sermons on that kind of thing because it's way too disruptive and they don't understand it. But the idea is, when he was saying it's within you, he's saying it's you. There is no separation. You are one.
Right.
I and the
Right.
Father are one. You and the Father can be one if you have the eyes to see, you have the ears to hear. He's saying that we can become that. It's what shifted in you and me. You got to think about it. When I did that, when Amy did that clunky little prayer, and all of a sudden this demon starts flying out of my body, and I'm not a porn addict anymore. It wasn't because God changed. It's because we came to understand that it's in us, and it is us, and that we are empowered. In that because it's us.
Right.
And that's this illusion, my friend Monty calls the state of separation is an illusion.
Right.
And that was what shifted, and when guys come in here and they start going, okay, so it's in me, they still try to externalize it. It's like guys will find it so helpful that, okay, it's, porn's not the problem. It's the medicine. What am I medicating? And then you find out there's some small group somewhere working with My Pilgrimage, and they're still confessing how long it's been since I've medicated.
Right.
And I go, no, that's not the point. That's not the point. It's let's abolish this externalized holiness concept, and let's understand that it's in us, and we are on a hunt. We're using triggers to help us find the energies inside of us, and then we're using our spirits as an operating system for moving that energy out of our body.
Right. Right.
That's it. It's an operating system. It's a real thing. And we are using that. Triggers are literally just little breadcrumbs on the trail that help us find that. Right. And so, I was working with a woman the other day, and we're chatting, and she's saying things have been so great with me and my husband this week because, the kids were gone for a whole week. Mm. And she's like, but when the kids come back, my kids, their grandparents had them. She's like, when the kids come back, it just gets, it's so hard and all that. I go, yeah, because your kids trigger you. And she goes, oh, that's hard for me to admit. Like, yeah, simple. I go, but this time you have to feel your children as real people. You have to, when they come back in, feel the energy and feel how it affects you, and it'll help you find a bunch of new stuff.
And it will help you find. Right. Yeah. So like everybody who would be listening to this, if you've read the books or if they've worked through the guidebook or something like that, but if you worked at all in the concept, like I think often at the beginning of this, you can find those triggers really quick. As soon as your perspective,
you're walking through the poppy field and they're just like everywhere.
Everywhere. Your perspective shifts and it just goes, as soon as you go inward, you go, oh, and it's all there and it's all there. And it's been there a long time, and you can recognize, oh my gosh, it's been there the whole time. And I just have never shifted and went inward. Let me ask you something. If someone was listening to this and they were sitting there right now and they wanted to just put that into practice in a simple way, what would you tell them to do?
Well, it starts with the number one thing is you have to start to learn how to feel. You have to learn how to feel. So, the number one thing that like feels like redemption in My Pilgrimage guidebook and these videos and stuff, and we're all teaching what I teach my clients. First thing is you start to learn how to feel, because we don't recognize that primarily we think, and the brain is not a feeling machine. It's a thought machine. It's a story machine. It's an interpretation machine, but it's not a feeling machine. There is a life below your neck that is extremely active, and and what we have to do is we have to move into what you and I would probably call the watcher position, where you are actually functioning as an observer of your thoughts, and then you begin to observe what your body's experiencing. So
can you explain it? How do you do that? Like in your, I mean, I know how I do it. How do you do it?
Right. Well, I start with with clients, when I'm working with someone on one-on-one, it's standard homework, 10 minutes a day, every single day. You're going to spend observing your body below the neck. And so it's literally just about your attention. So I'll just tell them, they say, well, do you want me to do breathing and stuff? People go, I need to breathe. They go, you're already breathing. We don't need to, we're just going to pay attention to your breath. So use your breath and you just pay attention. Because even right now, like anybody that's listening to this, like they're paying attention to what we're saying. But if you switch your attention as we're talking, you can let the information come in, but start to pay attention to what your stomach is feeling.
Right.
Inside your stomach, what you're feeling inside your chest, and you'll find, because some of these conversations probably trigger people a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, you know what I mean? Like we've talked about that before. I've had a client say, hey, this week we're only going to think or speak about God in the feminine, and it triggers them. I take athletes. I work with a lot of high level athletes, and the younger ones that are local, I'll take them on the field, and all I do is put them in a drill or something, like primary soccer players, put them in a drill that causes them to fail.
Right.
Trigger immediately. Right. And all of a sudden, I'll watch I had this one girl, and we would call it the shutdown. If she started to fail after just a few minutes, her whole system would absolutely shut down. She'd go completely numb, completely numb. And it took me literally like 18, 19 sessions before she finally could really see it. Because she would fight, her ego was shut off and shut down so hard. And I would really have to trigger her, and I remember at one point she's shut off completely and she's just like a zombie. And I go up and I go, there you are. You see it? And she goes, yeah. I go, you're completely shut down. Her body literally powered down when it got triggered by failure. So she wasn't able, of course, to train or push hard or compete or do anything like that. She was destined to stay the same player she was always going to be. So that trigger, there was this heavy, dense energy in her body that you could probably interpret as depression, right? Sure. Which right now, she's a super rich kid and stuff. So the world is filled with just fun. Just have fun all the time. Have as much fun as humanly possible. But when she hits about 29 or something like that, and the world gets real, or she goes through something hard, it's going to lead to some very intense depression. And so we're trying to root this out, and the whole body shuts down. And she wasn't even looking at me. I'm trying to get her to pay attention to me. She's just like, I go, hi. I finally just yelled at her really viciously. And she goes like this. And it was just, I go, you awake now? And it's like, yeah. And I go, what are you feeling? She's like, I go, I'm not your fucking babysitter. I said that to her. She's 16. And she goes, and her chest got super tight. I go, now did you feel that? She goes, yeah. I go, okay, you understand I'm just trying to bring this up, right? And she goes, yeah, I get it. I'm like, all right. So then we start working with that energy, and it's fascinating for young kids, these athletes, failure is the number one trigger. Number one trigger and it's like that for a lot of us, money stuff is a huge thing for most people. I'd say, I think money is actually more intense than sexuality for a lot of people. Right. But I want to tell you about a conversation. I had a conversation with a friend the other night, and he's just one of these funny guys where we just hang out and we don't talk a lot. We talk about soccer. We're both big soccer guys. So we'll talk about soccer a lot, but then every once in a while he'll go, okay, let me ask you a question. And he'll start asking me questions. I'll go, okay. He goes, so I'm married and my wife's a great person. I like her. She's really great. He goes, but
hey, maybe we'll keep her.
I know. Literally, it's kind of like that. I hear that.
Hey, that's great. You like her. That's
Wait a minute. What was that from? What movie was that?
As Nick Cage, Taya Leone, the family.
Oh, man. Yeah.
When he's got the kids and she's like talking about the.
Yeah, they're good kids.
Yeah, I like. She's great. Yeah, and he's like, oh, great, Jack. Maybe we'll keep them. Yeah.
Well, anyway, he says this thing. He goes, but it's just not natural to be married to one woman. He goes, and the thing is, I want to stay married to her. He goes, but I just want to be able to have sex with other women sometimes. And I go, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? And I go, well, that's not the right question to ask if you're trying to get to the bottom of this. You go, what's your question? And he's just like, well, what do you think of that? And I go, I said, listen, man, I go, it depends on what kind of relationship you want to have with your sexuality. I go, do you want to be someone who your sexuality tells you what to do and you obey? Or do you want to be someone who tells your sexuality what to do and it obeys you? And he's like, yeah. And I go, one seems a lot more mature, huh? And he goes, yeah. And I go, so can we accept that right now your ego is creating a story about what sex with other women would be? I go, what's the story? And he goes, it would make me happy. I go, right. And that's a myth. And he goes, no, I really think it would. I go, I know. But it's still a myth. And it was funny is we were hanging out with another friend who has sex with like a new woman every day. I'm not even kidding. And he had already we've been hanging out and he'd left to go have sex with some other woman. And, wow. And literally I'm like, does it make him happy? He goes, no. I go, well, okay. So let's just kind of focus in here. I go, so here's your mythology that this is what's going to make you happy. I go, and now we have to ask the question, like your ego is trying to serve some purpose and it's clearly a very immature thing. I go, so your relationship with your sexuality, it's doing something to help you survive something. I said, do you think it's possible that there's some very young parts of you that are seeking the love, affirmation, and inclusion of a mother? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he just sat there for a second and he finally went, that's 1,000% correct. I go, right. Okay. Right. I go, all right. And I go, and that can be healed. It's a wound and it can be healed. Yeah. And he said, yeah, I need to work on that. I'm like, yeah, well, you know where to find me. So, right. But that's the idea is that for him, seeing and meeting an attractive woman, and he's got a bit of a celebrity status, so he meets a lot of them. And he's for him to meet an attractive woman was a trigger, but not a trigger in its triggering his sexuality. It's a trigger for his deep wound, that deep wound of a young boy that is still seeking the love of that unconditional love. And so his ego takes it, creates a narrative out of it. And now he's just struggling with it. And he's been working for years. And I know this, like he's been working for years to get his wife to understand how it's a natural, normal, healthy thing for him to want to have sex with all these other women. And I'm getting her. She's coming around after a few years. I'm going, man, God, that's a really intense way to try to manipulate a situation.
Yeah.
I said, why don't you just leave her? He goes, I don't want to leave her. I go, oh, okay, I get it. I said, now you realize, he goes, well, knowing what I know now, if I could go back, I wouldn't have gotten married. I go, yeah, but you know that right now, if you weren't married, your ego would be saying, if we can just get married.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably true, huh? I go, yeah, clearly, whatever you have to do to get the thing that your ego says you're going to be okay. And that's how porn functions for all these guys. Like, it's just this. It's always the narrative. If we get that, we'll be okay. But trauma in its nature is a time loop. It is the second you get the thing you had, you lost it. And you have to get it again, and you have to get it again. That's why the healing of trauma, dealing with that energy in the body, is the only way to stop porn addiction. It's the only way to stop any addiction. It's the only way to bring joy and love and peace. Now, that's the thing.
To stop, not to stop the behavior, but to find the freedom that we're talking about. The one where, and this is where that conversation we had with our Mormon friends the other day, when he was talking about how he had accepted the fact that this was going to be something he was going to fight for the rest of his life. And that's just kind of how that was going to be. And then I said that, and I go, I said, can you imagine if you didn't have to? And he was like, right. That you didn't have to have a filter on your phone. You didn't have to have a filter on your computer because it just wasn't that problem. And he goes, man, that would be nice.
That'd be great.
I'm like, all right, let's go for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, is you can stop the behavior by white knuckling yourself.
Yeah, you can do it.
But to be truly free, we have to heal.
There's a lot of guys in like the 12-step programs and in the recovery movement and in AA and SA and different that have gone through that and have found sobriety. Mm-hmm. And there is a large measurement of gratitude and pride that they have in that they have been sober. I have a very good friend of mine here on the island who has been sober for, I think, over 3 years now, and he's sponsoring some other guys, and it's great. He's a great guy, and I can see that he's happy about it. You know what I mean? And it does bring a measure of peace to his life. Yeah. And so it would be arrogant, I think, of me to go, yeah, but it's not real freedom if you can't have a drink. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like real freedom is you being able to pick up a beer and just drink one and enjoy it. And while that is true, and that is my opinion, that real freedom would be that alcohol has no grip on your life. So now you can have it and it's not a problem.
Right.
I can still accept that when you get to a point where you're like, yeah, I can live this way. This is what I want for the rest of my life. That you kind of have to do that.
Yeah. But it is my opinion, and that's a good way to preface it, that there is no possible way to live with that paradigm, because it creates a fundamental paradigm of what freedom is.
Right.
And it will fundamentally limit your capacity for growth.
Right.
Period. It sets a baseline and it sets a ceiling. Because if you are fundamentally in a prison that requires this type of discipline, and you must be able to control something, it's still controlling you, no matter what. No matter what, it's controlling you. And they can say, well, I have complete freedom. But it's like that guy you talked about the other day. He was like, but I know that if I let it for 1 second, my disease is right there. And that's the idea. That's why, when I get guys come in all the time that I'm working with one-on-one or whatever else, but listen, we're going to just take all the power away from whether you look at porn or not. That's not the measuring stick anymore. The measuring stick isn't the behavior, whether you're looking at it or not looking at it. The measuring stick here is what is your curiosity level? What is your courage level? What is your growth level? What are we talking about as far as joy, hope, freedom, like the experience of your body? Like, do you feel controlled? Do you not feel controlled? Is it a choice? Is it not a choice? Right. I ask guys all the time, like, is it a choice when you look at porn? They're like, I don't know.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Well, when you finally know, yeah, it's a choice. I choose or I not choose. Then you're free. Because then you can choose to do it or not to do it.
Right.
And of course, most guys, when they get there, they choose not to do it because it's like, well, it's not that great. It's like you kind of see it for what it is,
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird. And that shift can happen pretty fast. In fact, you see some of the guys that are on the Facebook group, the My Pilgrimage Facebook group, that have gone through that shift, and some of them quite quickly, where it turns over and they go internal and they start having these different experiences, and those things begin to lose their power. But it does come through the healing part of it. Whereas you do see some guys that it's just a mental game. They're just trying to motivate and change their stories or whatever, and there's not a lot of healing going on, and so they're still going to continue to struggle. And I look at it and I go, well, if that's what you got to do, if that's the thing that you have to do in order to get there, it's not everybody's going to have an immediate shift. For me, it was like 2.5 hours of that experience at White Raven. And I went out and I was like, I'm not a porn addict anymore, and the shift happened very quickly. And over the next 6 months, it was a radical experience.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to have that. Right.
Yeah.
I think getting back to and we don't have to have two kind of, this is a pretty simple understanding in terms of triggers and how that goes.
Yeah.
I just want to talk about that conversation we had with our Mormon friends the other day.
Who might be listening.
Right? Yeah, he might be. Yeah, he might be. And I hope he is. I know he said he's going to read the book and everything. And we had talked about, the freedom, the real freedom of having all the choices in the world and not having all the condemnation of or the fear of, I can't go to the mall because there's a Victoria's Secret right at the entrance. It's funny because here in Kahului at the Queen Kaumanu Center, the biggest mall on the island, right? You walk in and immediately on the left, giant posters of women in lingerie, right? Yeah. There are some guys, and I actually have had conversations with guys. Yeah, I can't go in there. If I go there, I got to kind of try and go through the Macy's because then I don't have to see that, and then I can and I'll go. I almost want to prescribe to them, hey, let's go there together. Let's sit there and just stare at this.
Bring lawn chairs, just like sit there.
Yeah. Crack a beer, lawn chair.
That'd be awesome.
Just sit there and go, cheers. And then let's talk. Let's look at this thing, and let's talk about what's happening inside your body.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that we can then close our eyes and we breathe and come to that attention and go, all right, now we know where we need to go.
Yeah. I did that with a guy in a session once. I had him.
Really?
I said, yeah. I said, go ahead and flip open your computer. And he goes, what? And I go, I go, what's your favorite porn site? And he's like,
okay, so this is good.
Yeah, he told me. And I go, okay. I said, so I want you to type that into the URL. Okay, but just don't hit enter until I tell you. And he goes, are you serious? And I go, yeah, go ahead and do it. I go, just trust me. And he goes, okay. And he types it in. I go, and I said, now just hold your finger above the button. And then I go, don't hit it till I say. And he goes, okay. I go, now do you feel that in your, I think it was his chest. He's like, yeah. I go, where else do you feel it? And he goes, my throat. I'm like, okay. What about your stomach? Like, yeah. And he's kind of really shaky, because the adrenaline started pumping too,
right.
And I go, okay, go just shut your laptop and let's work. And he just shut his laptop. We never went into the site, but we moved a ton of energy out of his body. It was fascinating, but it was like, we'd been talking about those triggers. And I go, it's really simple, man. Like, and the idea is to be able to bring your awareness to that space, to that moment. I think we've got some exercises in the guidebook to help with that, but in every chapter in the guidebook, we have that little check-in, where you have to,
the body check-in.
You got to feel your body for a while. And man, once it shifts to that, but the mind still does its thing, and as long as it's allowed to. And I know people that have been, there's some people hold such intense forms of trauma and trauma at such deep levels that they will do anything they can to avoid having to actually feel it. I got a friend of mine, he's known for years he's known that he's got to go into this stuff. I've even done a little bit of one-on-one work with him. Right. And the other day he told me he's really working hard at balancing his eyes. And I was like, are you serious? He goes, yeah. I go, whoa, really? Wow, man.
Right.
I can't believe that that's the route you went with this. But I know what kind of trauma he holds.
Right.
We touched the surface of it once, and it scared him so bad. He was just like, I'm like, bro, we need to work into this. And he'll have to at some point. It's a given. That stuff doesn't go away. You know what I mean? Right. Unless it's healed. It gets worse. It rots. It literally will rot him from the inside.
Right.
And that's the thing. But these triggers I always think of it like it's like a depth charge. You remember the concept of depth charges? When you got a submarine under the surface and you set a
dude.
You drop the depth charge in to try to make the sub come up. That's the idea, is you set a certain depth to it. So you drop a bunch of depth charges in. That's essentially what triggers are. you know, they drop way down below the surface of our unconscious. So all these things, these people reach deep into our unconscious. My daughter is the biggest trigger I have. And it's weird because it's shifted where she's not triggering stuff inside me so much, but I'll get triggered by getting sucked into her energy. So she'll have a bunch of trauma, you know, she's got a lot, and, you know, and just, you know, it's not all my fault. She's adopted, but she's not all my fault. A lot of it is, but but I'll get sucked into her trauma.
Yeah.
And it'll resonate with something deep. She's helping me mine the depths of the McMurray-ness in me. And I know you
context.
know what that means.
Yeah, I know what that means. Context is a little bit is on our mother's side, we're McMurrays, and the family, especially the men in the family, and going back to World War II and maybe a little bit before that as well.
Maybe even to our Highlander days, who knows?
Yeah, and the Highlander days and the Scottish, it's just been war. It's been war going all the way back, and so there's been all this war trauma all the way back, and we can still see it and how it affects everyone in our family, but especially the men in the family.
Yeah. It's this really abrupt, lots of anger, really abrupt. Just, I mean, what I tend to do is just squash, you know, she comes up with her idea and I just hit her. No, and it's just this, I'm going to rule with an iron fist. Now she's the same way. Right. She's got all this violence and anger inside of her. And so it becomes this, like, who's the alpha male? And, you know, I got a 7-year-old girl here, you know what I mean? But it becomes this thing where, but I know what's happening. She's helping me mine the depths of that inside me. And it's a very difficult process, but it's incredibly powerful and incredibly important. And we talk about it and we repair a lot and we do all this stuff. But over the last few years, I've gotten calmer and calmer and calmer. You know what I mean? And I'm going to continue to become until I'm, you know, I'm seeking that peace, that profound peace that goes beyond anything I can explain.
Right. She may take your life.
She may take my life.
But she'll never take your
my freedom. No, she's really, honestly, man, she's the only thing triggering me now.
Right.
She's the only thing. Everything else, I'm able to keep it in this very observational space, and it's really fascinating. Every once in a while, I'll feel some energy that has the opportunity to trigger me, but I can keep it at it. I can kind of keep it at bay, you know? And I tend to stay out of people's energy. But with her, man, she's the one.
For me, honestly, like my triggers are my kids, and it's mainly my middle one, Noah, who's he's very much the McMurray in the family. The other two are Gildersleeves, and I've kind of got the hang of Gildersleeves. You know, that's my wife's family. The middle one, he's got that red hair, the Scottish fire, and he's got that whole thing down, and so I've been working a lot around that, and we're in a good space. It's been really good. So, I think it's a good place to kind of stop in terms of the conversation about triggers. This is a really important one. And I imagine that people that are listening, even if you haven't had this from the video or the books, that you're going to want to spend a little bit of time kind of feeling. And so I want to encourage people to take the time to do that now. And then when you do that, when you're feeling, there's a really helpful tool that we have. And that is, you can ask for help in those spaces too. Sometimes you're too scared, and sometimes you're afraid to be there by yourself and kind of feel something, like you were talking about your friend, that his trauma, we just touched on it a little bit, and it was so terrifying that, you can reach out in your heart through prayer. You can reach out to someone in spirit. And we call that in spirit, in that you can actually close your eyes and you can ask for help. You can say, I need someone to help me with this. And you never know who will show up, you know? So, well, okay, dude, that was good.
All right. That was good. And I feel like this conversation is the center of the hourglass. If you will,
that's good.
This entire structure, because it is very much, when your paradigm of the trigger shifts, and your attention starts to go to what your body's experiencing, as opposed to this constant external monitoring, it literally can flip the entire thing.
Completely.
Interesting conversation. Again, like we said every week, if you have thoughts, you have opinions, any ideas, go to the My Pilgrimage, the Facebook group. Join if you haven't joined. If you're in there, just give your thoughts. Just put it out there as a post and go, hey, this is what I think, this is what I found helpful. This is what I didn't find helpful. This is my experience, because everybody's having kind of a unique experience. We're all kind of holding hands on this road as we go along. But the truth is that, your experience is distinct to you. So we really want to hear from you. A couple things that'll help us, just if you guys rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts especially, or on Spotify, that's really helpful for us. It'll help us kind of wake up the awareness for other people. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you're getting the notifications every week. We're going to come out on Tuesdays and once a week, and we also are going to be starting some other types of conversations and things that are going on as well. So those will pop up if you subscribe. That'd be great. If this is really working for you and you think this is helpful and you want to just find some place to kind of to give, we have a Patreon link on the mypilgrimage.com homepage up in the top right hand corner, and you guys can go and you can give $5 a month or whatever it is that you feel like giving. That will help us continue to upgrade. As you can see, we have upgraded a little bit. We have a Yeti mic, and the sound equipment is a little bit better. The conversation between Seth and I was better, and that's because of the Patreons, the guys that have gone and helped us kind of start to make this thing better. So we're learning all kinds of wonderful new things. So, okay, so that's it. Week 5 in the bag. We're talking triggers. Next week, we're going to talk about authority. We're going to talk about what it means to have authority. In the Christian world and in the spiritual world and religious world, in Islam and Judaism and stuff, there's a lot of talk about authority. We talk a lot about the authority of Jesus, and we talk about all those ideas. And we're going to talk about why all that authority that we seem to think that we have hasn't really helped us in our addiction problems up till now. And so we're going to talk about what that is, and we're going to start learning about how to really understand and exert spiritual authority over your addiction and over your life. So, till next week, aloha.